Thank you all for coming tonight. It's been great evening. It's like a family reunion. It's great to hear all the conversations going on. I'm Brian Lockman. I'm president of PCN, Pennsylvania Cable Network, and we are here to celebrate the publication of a book based on the oral history of Senator Arlen Specter. It is something that PCN conducted with the senator starting in 2011. It took about a year to get the whole thing done. We sat with him for 10 different occasions and would talk to him for 2 hours on each occasion and ask him the questions about anything he could remember about his life, anything he wanted to talk about. And we wanted to, PCN is unlike any other channel on the dial, that we have the luxury of time. So we didn't want to squeeze it into an hour or a half hour or even 2 hours. We wanted it to be as long as it was. And it ended up being a 15-hour television series, which aired on PCN in 2012, over 3 nights, over 5 nights, 3 hours a night, 15 hours, and we're going to re-air it next week, starting 1 week from today, Monday through Friday, 7 to 10 p.m., 3 hours a night, Arlen Specter's Oral History. It is fascinating television, and if you did not get a chance to watch it first time around, we're going to give you a little preview of it now.
I'm frequently asked, why did I get into government politics? And I think it goes back to my family influence. Both of my parents came from Russia to escape the Tsar's tyranny. My mother came when she was 6 years old with her parents and younger brother. My father came when he was 18 in 1911. And would tell stories about the Cossacks driving down the streets of their little town in Ukraine, looking for Jews, a lot of anti-Semitism. He came to the United States to find a better way of life and was always very much concerned about government. He talked about the tyranny of the Tsar in Russia, talked about the opportunities in the United States, said that the government would always provide the background for a man to be able to earn a living. And one of his expressions was Yiddish, schwer to mach a leben, which means schwer is hard to mach a leben, a living.
At what point in your life did you notice that it didn't matter whether you were Jewish or not?
Never. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe not. Probably not. When I was DA, I convicted the stadium coordinator. I convicted the chairman of the Philadelphia Housing Authority. I convicted the deputy commissioner of licenses and inspections. They were on the tape. Attorney General Katzenbach said in Philadelphia, half the people are on the take. I had come to the attention of the Department of Justice because I was the trial prosecutor against the Teamsters in Philadelphia. So when President Kennedy was assassinated a few months later, November 22nd, and the President Johnson appointed a commission to investigate the assassination, they made a decision to seek independent lawyers from around the country. And my initial response was not to be inclined to do it. And when I talked to my friends, I talked to my best friend, a lawyer named Marvin Katz, later federal judge. He said I'd be foolish not to do it. And he said, if you don't, I'd like the job myself. I had known him since college days, and that was the only time he ever volunteered to do something. So that brought sort of a high-level recommendation to it. And ultimately I decided to do so, and it went from there. I have never had any personal doubts. I had lost elections. I never took any of them personally. If you want to be a candidate, you have to be a risk taker. And if you want to put your name out there, you have to be prepared to lose as well as being prepared and hopeful of winning. My first recollection of being in the Capitol was really on the swearing-in day, which was a big day, and we marched down the aisle in groups of 4. And after the oath of office was taken, we then went over to the old Senate chamber for the photographic session. And Vice President Mondale was finishing up the Carter administration and administered the oath both in the Senate chamber and for photographic purposes in the old Senate chamber, and it was quite a moment. I have a photograph in my office of Joan, my 2 sons, and me with Mondale administering the oath, and great feeling. When I joined the Republican caucus after the 1980 election, there were a lot of people who were speaking the way I did. Mark Hatfield and Lowell Weicker and John Chafee and Mac Mathias, John Danforth and Bob Packwood and John Hines. But by the time 25 years had passed, the moderates could meet in the telephone booth and not be crowded. When I look back at the presidencies and look back at the policies, I really more agree with John Kennedy, who said sometimes party asks too much. And I believe that the best course is independence, that independence is closely allied with integrity. And I think an individual ought to vote his conscience, and if that costs a person their electoral victories, so be it. But I would tell people who aspire to move up the ladder that it's going to require risk-taking. On the great Shakespearean statement of "to thine own self be true," follow your conscience, follow your aspirations.
Arlen Specter was a prominent public figure in Pennsylvania and on a national scale. From the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office to the Warren Commission and the United States Senate, Specter was a lightning rod on social issues and a man of principle in public service. Now, PCN brings you a direct account of his life and accomplishments in a new book, Arlen Specter, An Oral History.
Fascinating television. Whenever I find myself in front of an audience, I have to talk a little bit about PCN because there are still some people who don't know all about us. PCN, Pennsylvania Cable Network, is a nonprofit cable television network. We are seen in every cable home in Pennsylvania, 3.3 million homes, and we are essentially C-SPAN for Pennsylvania. So everything C-SPAN does covering the federal government, we do covering the state government. In addition to that, we do other Pennsylvania-related programming like the State Farm Show, our Gettysburg programming, our factory tours. I get to do a weekly book show where I interview authors of books on Pennsylvania. We spent a couple hundred hours interviewing Pennsylvania World War II veterans, and we're able to do it, and this is the most important thing, if you remember nothing else, remember this, we get our money from the cable companies that carry our programming. We do not get any money from the state or federal government. We are not advertiser supported. The fact that we're not advertiser supported gives us a luxury to put things on television at a pretty big scale. 10 million people can watch us if everybody watches at the same time, and put things on that no network in their right minds would air. I mean, what network in their right mind would take a camera and point it at someone and say, okay, tell your life story, and let it roll and air it for 15 hours? Well, nobody would, but we did. And it was a great experience doing this. The things we got from him in asking questions and wanting to go very slowly into details with things like, describe your bedroom when you were a kid. What was the house like when your parents grew up, where you grew up? Was your mother a good cook? Who was your friend? Who were your friends in school? Who was your favorite teacher? And all those little building blocks were the things that went together to make Arlen Specter. And these are things that if you did a quickie interview or a traditional biography might be overlooked. And some things he would bring up every now and then. It was sort of a continuing theme. One was about his father, and you could tell, for all of his accomplishments in life, you could tell he really wanted to make his father proud, that was something important to him. And the other thing, which we referred to in the video, was the discrimination he felt for being Jewish. I mean, there were law firms that wouldn't hire him because he was Jewish. There were fraternities that wouldn't allow him in because he was Jewish. And that is something that he carried with him, and a very important element in making Arlen Specter who he was. So you're going to hear from some very interesting people tonight, and we're going to start with Francine Schertzer. She and I did kind of tag team interviewing where we shared the interviewing duties, or really the privilege of doing the interviews. And she is the person who has final decision about all the programming that goes on PCN. She is our Vice President of Programming, Francine Schertzer.
In 2011, as Brian mentioned, he'd suggested it might be a worthy project to conduct an oral history. Senator Arlen Specter was the very first person that we both wanted to feature. He was one of the most prominent figures in modern day history. The senator just finished his tenure in the US Senate, so I reached out to his son Shanin to float the idea and to see if he'd be willing to put me in contact with his father. Fortunately, within a matter of days, I received a quick positive response, and thereafter arranged interviews with the senator, typically, as Brian had mentioned, once a month throughout 2011 and early 2012. So for roughly 2 hours each session, Brian and I had the fortune of sitting and asking very basic open-ended questions and just letting one camera roll and let the senator tell his story. As someone who considers herself a bit of a political nerd, I jumped at the opportunity to sit across from the senator as he relayed his experiences about investigating President Kennedy's assassination through the Warren Commission or his role in the Clinton impeachment hearings. And during the course of the interviews, a few things stood out to me. First of all, Senator Specter had an impeccable recall of detail. He could provide precise names and dates of individuals, anything from world leaders to his high school debate team. He discussed about major political events as well as growing up in Russell, Kansas. The senator also had this dry wit about him. Typically, as an interviewer, I divide my attention between the course of the interview, what my next question will be, while also dividing my attention to how my guest would respond. It was through Senator Specter, it was almost as though the Senator Specter was testing me to see if I was listening to him, because he'd often throw in a zinger during the course of response just to see how I'd react, I think. I think part of the value in conducting these interviews in the long form is that, as Brian mentioned, you get a true sense of who the senator was and where he came from. He told stories about selling cantaloupes from the back of his father's truck, and he often spoke about competing on his high school debate team, two things that likely developed the senator's work ethic and his deliberative skills that were later revealed throughout his public service. There were times during a break in the interviews when the senator would sit back and look introspective, and he'd often comment, "This is really hard." The senator talked about how he was discriminated against because he was Jewish, and how throughout his career he wanted to ensure that people were treated fairly regardless of who they worshiped or where they came from. One last thing that struck me with working with Senator Specter is that he was really immersed in what he did as a job, as well as surrounding himself with smart professional staff who modeled that behavior. Whenever the senator appeared at PCN Studios as one of our guests for a show, he made a point of walking around and introducing himself and talking to all of our staff members on the crew as well. And as a former producer with PCN, I and several of my colleagues can attest that we received that same personal attention and professionality through all of his staff members that we encountered as well. Before I close, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank a few of the numerous people that helped make both the Oral History TV series as well as this book a reality. First of all, Shanin Specter, who helped us really kick off this project and put me in touch with his father back in late 2010. Also Stan Gorski and the staff at the Arlen Specter Center for Public Service. I recall many times sitting in a dark room before much of the current center existed and just looking through packets and packets of Polaroid pictures. And they were really immensely helpful in gathering a lot of the materials to put this project together. And finally, Senator Specter's staff, namely Ruby Evans, who helped coordinate numerous interviews with the senator. The TV series Arlen Specter, An Oral History initially aired on PCN in May of 2012, and it will re-air next week beginning on August 21st. And by releasing a printed version, we hope that we make the senator's story more widely accessible for years to come. Thank you for joining us.
And that's a key point about having a book version of this, because as good as the television version is, unfortunately, right now, as we speak, the videos are sitting on the shelf at PCN's library and no one can look at them. And this is material that should be available to historians and scholars and law students. And so in book form, people who are conspiracy theorists about the Kennedy assassination or are still mad about the Robert Bork questioning or the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearings, they can flip right to the part that they want. Our next speaker is Carol Fitzgerald. She recently retired as executive director of the Pennsylvania Society. She is currently a trustee of Chestnut Hill College and serves on the board of the Girl Scouts of Eastern Pennsylvania, the Board of Historic Philadelphia, and many others. She is a longtime friend of PCN's and of Senator Arlen Specter. Carol Fitzgerald.
Thank you very much. Arlen Specter was truly a giant among men. He was many things and had many gifts, all of which he shared with the people he knew and for the benefit of the people he served. He was a brilliant strategist, a pragmatic and inspiring leader, an unabashed intellectual, and a concerned citizen who truly cared. He wanted the best for his office family, which was composed of some of the best and brightest lawyers anywhere, and he wanted the best for the citizens he served. I was especially gratified when in 2007, the Pennsylvania Society awarded him their highest honor, the Gold Medal for Distinguished Achievement. That was a very special day for all Pennsylvanians. I had the pleasure and honor of knowing Arlen for many years, beginning in 1967, when my husband, Justice Jim Fitzgerald, worked in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. As time passed, I came to know Arlen very well, both as a professional and as a friend. In 1969, I had the privilege of working with Arlen and Joan in support of the National District Attorneys Conference. Arlen organized and hosted this memorable gathering in Philadelphia. DAs from around the country benefited from the wonderful events and programs that he had planned. In my role, I was put in charge of many of these programs, which included children's activities, luncheons, tours, lectures, and a gala dinner. This was truly a spectacular week for the many attendees. My husband Jim and I often enjoyed spending time with the Specters. Joan Specter was, and always is, bright, beautiful, elegant, as well as a gourmet cook. In fact, when they came to dinner at our home, I sought out menu help from my mother. I knew I couldn't come close to serving a dinner as fantastic as Joan would. When I remember Arlen Specter, I think about what a difference he made in the lives of others throughout his own life. I think of his warmth, his compassion, his thoughtfulness, and yes, his sense of humor. Arlen always had a twinkle in his eye and a devilish smile on his face. He had a certain joie de vivre, and it flowed forth in his every action. That joy survives him and is ever present as expressed in his words and in his stories. Words that thankfully are preserved in this wonderful book. And I am so grateful to Brian Lockman and PCN for this gift they have given us all, Arlen Specter and oral history. Thank you.
Our next speaker is sometimes better known as Carol Fitzgerald's husband. Justice Jim Fitzgerald started his career working for Arlen Specter in Philadelphia's District Attorney's Office. He later served on the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas and in 2007 was appointed Justice of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and since 2008 has served as a senior judge on the Superior Court. Jim Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Brian. That introduction wasn't original. I did not write it. It brings a story to my mind. One time I was in the lobby of the Waldorf Astoria, and someone said, during the gold medal dinner, and someone said, "You're Carol Fitzgerald's husband, aren't you?" I said, "That's exactly who I am." I was privileged to work for Arlen Specter as an assistant district attorney from 1967 through 1973. He demanded from his assistant district attorneys hard work, intense preparation, and a willingness to make difficult and sometimes unpopular decisions in the pursuit of justice. He had noble characteristics as district attorney. He led by example. All of us did our best to follow that example and to emulate the noble characteristics of our leader. Arlen Specter possessed knowledge, determination, and most of all, courage. It takes a brave man to make tough decisions, to stand up for what he believes. In short, to do the right thing in the face of resistance and even open hostility. My most poignant memories of Arlen in action were at hostile community meetings and demonstrations at City Hall. In the late 60s and early 70s, gang violence and the murder rate with juvenile offenders and victims was off the charts. DA Specter walked into a meeting among jeers, hostility, and shouts. He listened attentively and carefully, and then he began speaking about a program he was instituting to curb juvenile homicides. By the time he was finished, those jeers turned into cheers. That was DA Specter at his best. As I've said, we all worked hard, but what a joyous time it was in our lives. Arlen made the DA's office one big happy family. We had annual picnics, a family's holiday party, and each year, Arlen and Councilwoman Joan Specter gave a party at their home. This was a happy event, and we all got to know their sons, Shanin and Stephen, as they grew up. Let me finish by thanking Brian Lockman and PCN. You have captured and preserved for everyone the essence of a great public servant and a great man, Senator Arlen Specter.
Larry Kane is the Dean of Philadelphia Television News Anchors and recently marked 50 years in Philadelphia broadcasting. Congratulations. Not only that, but he was the only broadcast journalist to travel to every stop on the Beatles' 1964 and 65 tours of America, and he's got great stories to tell about that. So if you can nab him on the way out, ask him about that. But here to talk about his recollections of Arlen Specter, Larry Kane.
First of all, thank God for PCN. Local TV stations hardly cover politics, but they do charge $3,000 to $6,000 for commercial spots. So PCN covers the gap, and thank God for them. And thank goodness for Arlen Specter. I want to tell you very quickly what I think about when I think of Arlen Specter. Nerve, verve, panache, the creator of the 30-second soundbite, a man, along with his wife, who called me on a Saturday morning during the darkest hour of my professional life. Conviction, courage, a definite commitment to people, giving, brave, a great husband, father, grandfather, a friend, a man who would look at today's environment and have a lot to say. And I wonder what he would say about what's going on in the nation today. But I can guarantee you, if he could comment about it, he would react with swift, clear conviction, courage, always surrounded by frank and daring 30-second sound bites. Arlen Specter, there's never going to be anybody like him again.
Our next speaker was commissioned as an officer in the Marine Corps and served as a rifle platoon commander in Vietnam, where he received 2 Purple Heart medals for combat wounds. When he came home, he went to law school, started his legal career working for Arlen Specter and in the Philadelphia DA's office, and was himself elected district attorney in 1985. He joined the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in 1994 and was Chief Justice from 2008 until his retirement in 2014. Chief Justice Ronald Castile.
Thank you, Brian and Francine, and thanks for this this great book. It's as I read through it, see some of the things I've been involved with, and a lot of things Arlen's been involved with. I see Arlen. I see him speaking, even though I don't have to look at the television, because you know his cadence, you know how he spoke, and put his watch up here on the dais. He always did that just to fool everybody. But Arlen and I are somewhat alike in that we're both from different states. I'm from Florida, he's from Kansas originally, and we came to this city, as did Ed Rendell from New York, the governor's here. We came to this city as strangers. I came into the Navy Hospital in 1968, and I liked Philadelphia. I liked the way they treated us in Philadelphia as veterans and in the hospital as wounded warriors. After I went to law school, I came back to Philadelphia, and I was thrilled when I was able to talk to Arlen Specter. At first, I had to go through Dick Sprague, if anybody knows who Dick Sprague is. But I was thrilled when I was offered a job in Arlen Specter's office, because at that time, he was nationally known for the work that he did on the Warren Commission. He was locally known for being the tough prosecutor that he was. And he was most importantly known, as far as I'm concerned, in that he professionalized the DA's office. And Jim Fitzgerald can tell you that, Ed can tell you that, Lynn Abraham can tell you that. And before he became the DA, it was like a political bastion. That's how you got hired, if you knew your ward leader, things like that. But Arlen made it all professional. And I was interviewed at University of Virginia by Paul Michel, and they offered me a job, and I said, I love it, I'll take it. So to me, it was the beginning of my career. And as I said, the three of us, we were from other states, and we came to Pennsylvania, and people embraced our, who we were, and elected us to some of the highest positions in the city of Philadelphia, the state of Pennsylvania, the Senate. So I always appreciated that. And some of the individuals that you see that were members of Arlen's office, who really were taught by him and Dick Sprague to be great prosecutors and moral individuals, as opposed to the unfortunate recent incident with that district attorney. But look at the people that left his office. You see what they are and who they've done and what they've been. Ed served in the office for 8 years. I served for 6. I served for 21. Lynn served for, I did 6 as the DA. Lynn served for 16 years. So Arlen's alums ran that office for like 35 years, and it was always a great office. And Jim Fitzgerald was one of our great persons there, and look at him, he went to the Supreme Court. I beat him to the Supreme Court, by the way, so. But those are two decisions that Arlen really made that affected my life in a personal sense, is that he hired me in the DA's office, and the best thing is I had a commitment to teach skiing to Army individuals coming back from Vietnam who were wounded veterans, and he allowed me to do that for 3 months, each of 3 years, and the place I had to teach was in Vail, Colorado, which was very nice. But once I got back after those 3 years, I said, you got to get serious about your career, Ron. So I did. And of course, I was elected to district attorney at that time. And Arlen and I were the last elected officials that were Republicans in the city of Philadelphia, which is quite a thing that happened back then when politics was really rough. And it happened to me as a Republican. So Arlen's been always one of my friends. Joan's been a friend all my life. His son, Shanin, and I finally learned where that name came from, your mother's maiden name. So I didn't know that until I read this book. One of the other things that Arlen did for me, which I really didn't know much about after I had to run for mayor, I went to a law firm, Reed Smith, Shaw McClay, and I think you remember Rizzo was saying, "What's the deal, Castile?" Well, I was in private practice, and I was making twice as much money as I made as a DA, and I would tell people that. But I lost that race. Of course, he died. They wanted me to come back and run against run for mayor. But that time, my friend Ed Rendell was running, so I said, "I'm not running against Ed Rendell. I don't have a chance," because we all know what Ed and what kind of a politician he is. So. But I'm sitting in Reed Smith, Shaw McClay's office one day, and I get a phone call from Ann Anstein, who was the head of the Republican Party statewide in the state of Pennsylvania. And she said, "Arlen, I was talking to Arlen Specter." I said, "Yeah, I know, he's a great guy." And he said, "He wanted me to call you." I said, "Ann, you could call me anytime you want." She said, "I was talking to Arlen, and I said, we're looking for a candidate for Supreme Court of Pennsylvania." So he said, "Well, why don't you call Ron Castile? I think he's available." So she says to me, "We're looking for a candidate for the Supreme Court." And I said, "And I'll help you out. I'll look for a candidate for you." But she said, "No, you don't understand. You're the candidate that we want." So Arlen was the one that set her onto me, and the rest is history. I always tell people I'm sitting in a private law firm office, and I'm filling out timesheets. If any of your lawyers know what timesheets are. So I'm saying, Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, timesheets. Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, timesheets. So I chose the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania because that was my career in public service. In the nation, in the Marine Corps, and in Arlen in the Senate, in the city of Philadelphia, both of us as assistant DAs. And then for the state of Pennsylvania, Arlen is our longtime senator, great senator. And everyone knows his history, and I won't repeat anything that he's done because I'm sure Shanin's going to tell us a lot about that too. And it's all in this book. And I served the state of Pennsylvania. Ed served it, and Arlen served as our U.S. senator. So it's a great book. I think it's a great project that you're doing. It's going to preserve a really interesting history as spoken, by the individual himself. And if you knew Arlen, this is exactly him. No, he didn't pull any punches, no holds barred, and it's a great thing. So congratulations to PCN, and he's a great American. And Shanin and Tracy and the girls and Joan, thanks for being there for me in my career too. Thank you, Brian.
Governor Ed Rendell joined Arlen Specter's district attorney's office in 1972 and was himself elected DA in 1977. He was elected mayor of Philadelphia in 1992 and governor in 2003. He was the subject of a PCN oral history, which also went 15 hours, so he knows just how hard it is to sit in a chair and talk to a camera about your life. There's probably nothing I can tell you about him that you don't already know. Governor Ed Rendell. Thanks for coming.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and always a pleasure to talk about Arlen. Lincoln wrote the Gettysburg Address on the back of an envelope. This is my talk here tonight. But, you know, when you're near the end of the line of speakers, a lot of things have been said, and everything that's been said tonight was right on. Arlen used his time in office very, very well. He used it to improve the lives of people. Anything that he touched changed for the better. When he was in charge of the investigation of the Philadelphia Magistrate Court, he did a terrific job, and out of it came the municipal court, which was a dramatic improvement of the way justice was dispensed in Philadelphia. Ron told you about the DA's office. Not only did he run a brilliant DA's office that was really a national model, but he did depoliticize the DA's office, and interestingly, it never went back. I tell the story in the book that I wrote. I tell a story about my time with Arlen. At the end, after Arlen had been defeated for a third term, I was the chief of homicide, and I met up with Arlen a couple of days before the end of the year, and he said, "Are you going to stay in the office?" And I said, "No, I just don't have a good feel about what's going to happen. I think I'm going to start my own practice and get involved in politics." And he said, "Well, great, I'll call Billy Meehan for you." And there was a silence. I didn't know exactly what to say, but I said, "Arlen, thanks very much, but I'm a Democrat." I was the chief of the homicide unit. I had been with Arlen for 6 years, and he never knew what my party registration was. Remarkable. And through thick or thin, that's never changed. Arlen in the Senate was incredible. Arlen's career was marked by incredible competence, incredible ability, incredible energy, but most of all, courage. And if I were to tell you what's lacking in America today, people say it's the fact that we're polarized. Yeah, we're a little polarized. But the main thing that's lacking in Philadelphia and in the United States today is political courage. If our leaders, our legislators had courage to do the right thing, we wouldn't be facing the problem we're facing today as a nation. We need more Arlen Specters, and I don't know where we're going to find them.
Our featured speaker tonight is Shanin Specter. He is founding partner at Kline Specter and a prominent Philadelphia lawyer, but more importantly, he is the firstborn son of Arlen and Joan Specter. He was a tremendous help in putting the book together and even spent some of his valuable time proofreading the book for us for free. I kept waiting for a bill to arrive in the mail, and it never did, so maybe I shouldn't be reminding you of that, but we couldn't have done it without you. We owe a great debt of gratitude to you for help in this book. Shanin Specter.
Well, thank you, Brian, very much. I see that a battery has just been placed in this microphone, and apparently none of the previous speakers have been recorded, so I think we're going to have to start all over again. I hope you don't mind. I do have the feeling that everything has been said, but not everyone has said it. So let me offer a couple of observations, if I may. First of all, I'd like to recognize my mother, Joan Specter. And my wife, Tracy Specter. And three of our girls, Perry and Lily and Hattie Specter. This is a great honor to be asked to give this keynote address. Congratulations to Brian Lockman and to Francine Schertzer on this tremendous accomplishment, a fantastic 15-hour oral history, and now this terrific book, which is the distillation of those 15 hours. My father's life has been the subject of a lot of writing. He was covered nearly every day during his nearly 50-year career in public life. There was an early book on his work in the Senate by political scientist Richard Fenno called Learning to Legislate. There were his 3 books. There is an upcoming book by Professor Evan Lane. But of all the books that have been written so far, this is by far the best. Why is that? I think it's because these interviews occurred after my father left the Senate. When he left politics, whatever shred of concern that he might have about the last election and the next election was gone. That honesty, that striking, unbridled, unmitigated candor is evident in this book. You saw one brutally candid exchange on the film earlier this evening, but it bears repeating. It was Brian's question to my father, at what point in your life did you notice that it didn't matter whether you were Jewish or not? And I'm in the world of asking questions and even teaching about how to ask questions. And there's an aspect to that question, if you don't mind my being marginally critical, which strikes me, and that is that the question assumed that being Jewish didn't matter in my father's life at the point when it was asked. After all, he'd been in the Senate for 30 years. He'd been DA of Philadelphia, elected for 2 terms. But my father's answer was a stark recognition that it did matter that he was Jewish. He said, as you saw, never. And then the hesitation, maybe tomorrow, maybe not, probably not. And I think that Ed Rendell could probably testify to this as well. Anybody in politics who is Jewish knows that that is the answer. Of course it matters. It will always matter. I've been asked many times what I think was my father's greatest contribution to public life. And he would typically say what Ed Rendell talked about a few minutes ago, which was his work on the magisterial system in Philadelphia. That was work that he did when he was 34 years old, largely alone, after he finished his work on the Warren Commission staff, appointed by then Governor Scranton to undertake that investigation. Why did he feel that way? Because the magistrates had preyed on the poor, the disadvantaged, the gay, minorities, folks that didn't have protection in Philadelphia, who didn't have representation, who didn't have access to justice. He felt that getting rid of those parasites on our system was his greatest accomplishment. Some people would say that his greatest or perhaps most infamous contribution, again, was something that Ed talked about, which was the single bullet theory. And it may be that centuries from now, that will be his contribution that will be the most remembered. He certainly loved being a prosecutor. He would say that the best job he ever had was being an assistant DA. And probably Ron and Ed know what that means to be an assistant DA, and the love of, and Jim, and the love of the courtroom and what you can do for your community in that position. He said that every problem in the world came to the United States, and that every problem in the United States came to the United States Senate. And I would add to that that he felt that all of those problems were his problems too. And in his 30 years in the Senate, he tried to address them. He liked meeting with the world's despots, whether they were Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi or the Assads of Syria, father and son, with whom he met 20 times. Yes, he really liked having those meetings. That's just the kind of guy he was. And he thought very simply that in order to deal with the world's problems, you had to talk to the people who were causing those problems. He tried very hard to get into North Korea, to meet with the ruling elite. But in his 30 years in the Senate, that was one group he could not get in to see. Perhaps we are seeing the results of that failure of dialogue today, not just his inability to talk to them, but perhaps the rest of us and our inability to talk to them as well. This past weekend, I had the occasion to think of my father again as I saw the racist violence in Charlottesville and the tepid response from Bedminster. My mind went back to 1985 when President Reagan agreed to go to a cemetery in Germany in which Nazi war criminals were buried. My father sharply criticized the visit, even though he was in the same party as the president. We don't see too much intra-party hell-raising today, do we? As I think everyone here knows and has been talked about by many of you in your own way, my father highly valued his political independence. Ed called it courage. Others have used somewhat different words. I would characterize it as political independence. He felt it served the interests of Pennsylvania and the nation for him to make individualized judgments on the issues that came before the Senate. When he arrived in the Senate, the number of moderates in both caucuses was very large. Today, moderates are nearly extinct, and bipartisan voting is rare. A couple of weeks ago, seeing Senator McCain turn a thumbs down on the health care bill took me back to February of 2009, when our nation was facing, as Ed has referenced, the most severe economic crisis that we had faced and have faced since the Great Depression. And we had a new president, a Democrat, who was proposing a stimulus program, and the Republican Party was lockstep against it. I recall discussing that vote with my father in early February 2009, on the weekend before he cast that vote. He said to me that he was not sure how he would feel about the vote if he were 59 instead of being 79. But that at 79, it wasn't a close call. He was staring into his political grave, but his attitude was, so be it, which was exactly what we saw him say on the film a little while ago. My father cast the deciding vote on the stimulus, which cost him, remarkably, his party affiliation, his seniority, and his seat in the Senate. but he followed Dante's sentiment that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in time of moral crisis preserve their neutrality. And this, I think, was his greatest accomplishment in the Senate. His willingness to look at each matter independently with attention to detail and what he would call close inspection, utilizing a mind that was brilliant and resourceful, that was energetic and determined. This 15 hours of video, now organized into this 342-page written history, is excellent precisely because it allows all of us to see how all of those formidable personal qualities could be concentrated and harnessed on the matter at hand, be it a case, a campaign, a personal problem, a debate, a vote, or the making of a law or its enforcement. It is these lessons that I hope may guide current and future leaders to help shape a better, safer, and more just society and world. Thank you.
Well, we're just about done. I do want to remind you that next Monday on PCN from 7 to 10 p.m. we will re-air the entirety of the oral history, and through the good offices of C-SPAN, they are allowing us to re-air the Senator's questioning of Robert Bork and Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill, and also his farewell address in the Senate. Fascinating television. So set your DVRs or buy the DVD, which we have up top there. So we have the books upstairs, and feel free to pick them up. If you get home and decide you didn't buy enough books, it is available through Penn State Press. And well, I also want to thank Philadelphia University very much for helping us in the book and in this event tonight and co-hosting us, and to Whitney Foote and Adam Murray of PCN for pulling this whole evening together. And we have one more speaker, and that is Evan Lane. He is with the Arlen Specter Center for Public Service. We really could not have done the project without them. All the photographs were courtesy of the center. And with Evan Lane, after a 28-year career as a trial lawyer, he became the director of the Philadelphia University Law and Society program and serves as the faculty director of the Arlen Center for Public Service. And he will be giving tours of the center afterwards. If you're interested, look for him, and you can take a look through the center and see what they have to offer. Evan Lane.
I have the incredible honor of serving as the faculty director of the Specter Center. I'm a New Yorker, which you probably figured out in 2 seconds from my accent, and I really didn't know Specter that well. I knew he was an influential senator, and I also knew he was involved in the Warren Commission. So I've really had the opportunity to really learn who he was and what he accomplished, which continues to amaze me. He has been in the middle of so many things. There are people who have careers for 10 years, 30 years, 50 years that don't get involved with the amazing amount of diverse topics that he did in his career, whether it was gay rights, Iran-Contra, the Clinton assassination, the Clinton impeachment, the Kennedy assassination. You could go on. And not only was he involved in it, but he was a critical policymaker in most of these things. The insanity plea throughout the entire country has changed because of Arlen Specter. The Office of Inspector General, which checks on the CIA, is because of Arlen Specter. We can go through this. It absolutely amazes me, and I learn more and more, especially as I've written the book about him. The center is dedicated to furthering the legacy of the great senator. We further legacy through large events such as the Single Bullet exhibition, which of course talked about his serving in the Warren Commission. This exhibit was nationally recognized. It was front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer and featured as a major article on every single television station. That's one thing we've done. Another large event that we did featured the governor right there. We talked about head injuries in football before everyone else was talking about that, right, Governor? We were ahead of that. We had an incredible panel of people talking about the risks to our athletes because the senator was very involved in sports and, of course, in health. We have coming up this April, we're going to deal with the issues of suicide among college students and what we can do to prevent that. The center will be behind bringing organizations to this university to help our students to hopefully prevent them from this horrible tragedy. The center will be behind that. Every Thursday, we engage in dialogue the senator would be proud of, where we get together with leaders of the community, whether it's faculty or outsiders, to discuss important issues of the day, from women's rights, Trump, of course, and other issues. Dialogue and discussion. That is what we are involved with. And most importantly, we want to push forth our knowledge about what we know, what I've learned to the senator, to the country at large, and we, because of an amazingly generous gift from the Specter family, we are now going to be doing research fellowships. We'll be engaging top scholars around the country to use the Arlen Specter collection, which we organize with the University of Pittsburgh, as a primary source. It is hoped by writing these incredible articles, more books, lectures throughout the country that will feature what the senator did, so everyone will get to know what I've learned, the amazing contribution that Specter has given to not only Pennsylvania, but the nation. I want to, wrapping up, I have learned one thing. Many people live lives of no risk. The senator said many times the risks he's taken, and sometimes he has suffered for it. But he took risks because he believed he was doing the right thing for his constituents. He lived a life that mattered. When he left, people look years from now and say, this is what this man accomplished. He made a difference. His legacy actually had impact. His life had value. And that is what our mission is in the center, is to give what I've learned to not only this crowd. You all know it. I'm preaching to the choir. You all know the incredible things he's done. But our goal and mission is that universities across the country, that they learn that as well. For those of you who would like a tour, I'll be standing right over there by those doors, and I'll lead you to the center, and I'll take you to his office where he has many of these pictures and memorabilia, which is pretty interesting stuff. So I'll be there. Thank you so much for your attention.
Well, that's it. We are deeply grateful to all of our speakers to give their valuable time to be with us tonight. We cannot thank you enough, and thank all of you for coming out tonight. I'm Brian Lockman. Thanks for coming.
Hi, I'm Bob Rovner. I was honored to be a state senator in Pennsylvania, and I do a radio show. And I first met Arlen Specter in 1965 when I was still in law school. And I helped him in his campaign for DA. And he did the impossible. He won as a Republican in the city where only Democrats won. And then in '69, we helped him again. But in 1968, I was honored that he asked me to be an assistant DA. And Ed Rendell and I were sworn in together as assistant DAs in 1968, 49 years ago, when we both graduated law school. And we helped him run for mayor in '67. Whenever Arlen wanted me, he would call me on the phone and said, Bob, I need the first team. And Arlen was like a big brother to me, and I helped him on every one of his 5 campaigns for U.S. Senate. And I don't think anyone will ever match his record of being the longest-serving U.S. Senator in Pennsylvania history. I was honored that the Specter family asked me to be a pallbearer when Arlen passed away in 2012, too young. He was 82 at the time. But I still call Joan on June 14th, which was their wedding anniversary, and on February 12th, Arlen's birthday. And he was born in 1930. I knew his mom, I knew his brother, and Arlen was my mentor, he was my preceptor, and he was a very good friend. So I'm honored to be here with the Specter family and the Friends of Specter today. And I'm glad PCN wrote this book. I love PCN, I watch it all the time, and this is a great event.
Arlen gave me my first job out of law school after I graduated from University of Virginia. I started off as an assistant DA up here when he was the boss. So, and at that time, the district attorney's office had a great reputation, and it changed dramatically when Arlen got in there. It was a political appointments and jobs and stuff like that. But then Arlen got in there and he made it a professional organization and well respected throughout the United States for some of the things he did locally in our office and of course nationally, including the Kennedy assassination investigation. And so when I got my first job there, it was a thrill for me because here I am working for a nationally known person and a great office, and it's helped me in my career. And Arlen, he evoked a sense of professionalism in all of us, and a lot of us went on to be great public servants. You look at Ed Rendell, who came from that office as mayor and governor. You look at Lynn Abraham, who came from the office. You look at me, who came from the office and became Chief Justice. And people don't realize it, but at one time, when I was Chief Justice and Ed Rendell was governor, the two branches of government were run by Arlen Specter, DA's office alumni, myself and Ed Rendell. I called him up and told him that. He didn't realize it. He said it was great. But he's done a lot of great things. And another thing that he did for me personally is when I was working in a private law firm, this Ann Anstein, who was the head of the Republican Party, called me up and she said, Arlen said I should give you a call. I said, Ann, sure, you can call me anytime. And I said, what can I do for you? He said, well, we're looking for a candidate for the Justice of the Supreme Court. And I said, well, I'll help you look for one. And she said, no, you don't understand. The candidate we want is you. So Arlen Specter recommended me to Ann Anstein. And I said, private practice. It paid well, but I didn't really like it that much. So I ran for the Justice of the Supreme Court, and I won. And it was a pretty tough fight because the Republicans had not won one of those seats in 12 years. So, and then by age, I became the Chief Justice. So I can owe a lot of what I am today and what I have done, not counting the U.S. Marine Corps, of course, to Arlen and starting off in that office and him being a friend over all these years. So it was sad to see him go, but this is a great book. I read most of it so far, and it's Arlen Specter, word for word. I could just see him saying that. So.
Hi, my name is Evan Lane. I'm a professor of history at now Jefferson University, and also director of the Specter Center for Public Service. The story I have about the senator is when he would call me on various different things that were going on in politics. And after the decision on whether or not the Affordable Care Act was constitutional, I got a call and said, the senator is here calling for you. Do you want to hear him? I said, yeah. Put him on the phone. So you can't help yourself. You got to do an all impression. Reverend, you want to hear what happened with the case? So I go, yeah. Tell me what happened. And he said that Scalia was annoying Chief Justice Roberts, constantly annoying, coming in and out of his chambers, trying to pressure Roberts to vote against the act. He annoyed him so much that Roberts voted the other way, just to show Scalia that the Chief Justice annoys you don't annoy the Chief Justice. So I said to Arlen, Senator Specter, I said to him, I can't believe one of the most important cases in American history that gives health care to millions is because one guy made another guy angry, and his answer was, well, he puts his pants on one leg at a time like any other man. And to me, that was the inside story of the most important case in our constitutional law last 10 years. Thank you.
My name is Shanin Specter, and regrettably, I can't condense my relationship with my father, Arlen Specter, into the time that's been given to me. But I would just like to say that this book is a great book. And it's a great book because it was the product of interviews with my father after he left the Senate. And so whatever shred of concern he might have had about being completely candid about his various views on issues that he may have had when he was in elective politics was gone when he gave these interviews, since he had left the Senate just before the interviews started. So this is a unique insight into a nearly 50-year career in public life that is strikingly candid and thorough. And my hat's off to PCN for this fantastic contribution to Pennsylvania. Go out and buy the book. Thank you.
I'd like to congratulate the university, PCN, the family of Arlen Specter. This is such a wonderful event to remember what he did for our country, what he did for 30 years beyond for our state, and also to think of what he might have said today in today's environment. I would have loved to have interviewed Arlen Specter today about what's happening in Washington, because the difference between Senator Specter and many of the people down there today is that they don't have the courage to speak out. He always did, on everything, on any subject. It was a pleasure to cover and a pleasure to know.
Hi, my name is Andy Wallace. I'm pleased to be here tonight. I worked for Senator Specter for almost 30 years. I served as his Northeast Director in Northeastern Pennsylvania. I traveled the state with him extensively. Wherever there was a problem, Senator Specter was there. He was the most amazing man to ever work for. One thing you learn from Senator Specter, you never take no for an answer. You just keep going and you keep pushing, and you always get things done. I also shared personal things with him. He was very good to me personally. He and I shared the same doctor. When I was diagnosed with cancer, he was very helpful to me. He sent me to Dr. Glick. We had a special bond, and Senator Specter will always be close to my heart and close to my family.
I'm Susan Siegel Bonavita Cola. I'm a former staffer with Senator Specter. And when the senator did his comedy routine, which he did, my husband and I took him up to Collegeville because they weren't sure how to get there, Joan and Arlen. And we decided, we were going to see the routine. And watching his face when he saw Joe Conklin doing him to him was the funniest thing I ever saw. So we watched Arlen Specter and Joe Conklin be Arlen Specter on stage, and then we took him outside and he looked at the marquee, and he got a big kick out of looking at the marquee. That's the best story I could tell you right now, was watching him see himself, and the comedy that he was able to do. He's a very, very dry comic, and we enjoyed him very much.
So my name's Andy Stern. I'm very proud to say that I'm a partner at Kline Specter, and I wanted to share one story with everyone that I'll never forget about Arlen Specter. He came to work at Kline Specter, and I remember when we were very honored to have him, and he's obviously, everyone knew who he was. I first saw him in the elevator. He clearly did not know who I was, and I said hello to him. He went out of his way to introduce himself as though I didn't know who he was, and then started to ask questions about me, and then said, I really would like to have lunch with you. And I thought, oh, that's great. I know how busy he is, and, maybe sometime we'll have lunch. I went back to my office. The phone was ringing. He went up to the top floor, 19th floor. I was on the 17th. I look at the dial, and it says Arlen Specter. He was calling me right away to set up lunch. We went to his place, which was the Oyster House, which I know he goes there many times, so I found out later. And what I really enjoyed was how much I kept trying to ask him questions, and he was very good about talking about all kinds of things, but he really wanted to know about me, wanted to know what kind of cases I tried. And I thought to myself that, and everything I've heard here tonight, I think one of the greatest ingredients to his success was his sincerity, his genuineness. He was very down to earth. He was very credible. In my profession, it's about persuasion. And I think that through his time and his successes, that was one of the key ingredients to his success. And I just felt very honored to know him. Thank you.
I have many vivid memories about Arlen, but the one that is the most striking to me, because it speaks to his independence, was what he did with the DA's office. Before Arlen Specter became the elected DA of Philadelphia, whether it was a Democrat or Republican who was DA, they always hired through the party. You had to be a Democrat to get a job if there was a Democrat DA, and vice versa if there was a Republican DA. Arlen never asked us in the interview whether we were independent, registered Democrat, registered Republican. And after serving with him for 6 years, when he was defeated for a third term, in December of that year, late December, I met him outside in the elevator bank, and he said to me, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to stay in the office? And I said, no, I think I'm going to open up my own practice and try to get involved in politics. And he said, well, great, I'll call Billy Meehan for you. Billy Meehan was the Republican leader at that time. And I didn't know what to say, and I was silent for about half a minute, and then I said, well, Arlen, thanks very much, but I'm a Democrat. I was chief of the homicide unit, promoted several times by Arlen,